Welcome to Ms. Taylor's Honors Geometry videos, and today we're going to talk about radical operations. We're getting into our right triangles, which means we're going to be dealing with a lot more radicals. Now, real quick reminder, a radical is any problem with a square root. Every square root has an invisible one in front of it, just like every x has an invisible one in front of it, and we can only add or subtract radicals if they have the same base. So what that means is that they all must have the same number inside the radical for us to add or subtract them, just like if we had x's. So if it was 3x plus 4x, we would simply only add the 3 and the 4, and that would get us 7, and then we would just write down the x. So that's all we're doing, is we're making sure that the numbers inside the radicals are the same, and then we're going to do whatever math operation the numbers tell us to do. So negative 8 plus 2 is going to be negative 6. And so we're going to have negative 6 square root of 4 is going to be our answer. So typically we're going to see problems like this. So what we first have to do is we have to look at our square roots, and we need to simplify our square roots. So 21 can be 3 and 7, but I can't divide it by 2. I can't divide it by 4. And 3 and 7 aren't perfect squares. 84, let's try 84 divided by 4, because that's usually my go-to. It'll go into 4, 4 will go into 8 twice, 4 will go into 1 once. Okay, so 4 and 21. So our square root of 84 equals the square root of 4 times the square root of 21. So we know that the square root of 4 is a perfect square, so we're going to take the square root of 4, and that gives us 2, and then we're going to leave 21 in that square root. So when we do this, I'm going to rewrite everything but the square root of 84, and now I'm going to put that in its place. So times 2 and the square root of 21. So now what I have to do first is I have to multiply these two terms. So I still have 8 square root of 21. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16 square root of 21. Now that my square roots are the same, I can simply do 8 minus 16, which gets me a negative 8, and then I put down the square root of 21. So again, we've got to simplify things first. So 98, let's try 98 divided by 4 first. 4 will go twice, and then I get 18, so that's not going to work. 9 won't work. 16, if 4 won't work, I know 16 won't work. 25, it doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. 36 and 36 is going to be 2. 72 plus another 36 that's 108, so that's too big. So now let's try 49. 49 and 49, we get an 8. All right. So I can divide 98 by 49. So we're going to take our square root of 98, and it's going to be the square root of 49, and I added 49 twice, so that means it was the square root of 2. So again, we're going to take the square root of the perfect square, which is 7, and we're going to leave the non-perfect square inside the square root. So now I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put it in the spot of the 98. So 6 squared root of 2 minus 5, and then 7 square root of 2. So that means I need to multiply the negative 5 times the 7. And so we get negative 35, and then we just tack down the square root of 2. So now we can do that regular math. We can do 6 minus 35. 6 minus 35 should be 29. And so we get a negative 29 square root of 2 as our final answer. All right, I want you to pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, so if you have done this one on your own, hold on, I gotta pull up my answer key real quick because I don't know why I didn't have it open in the first place. Oh, I know where you are. You are there. There we go. And so your final answer to this one should be 331 square root of 2. All right, so when we multiply radicals, we're going to multiply the outside, the whole number outside the radical, and then we're going to multiply the number inside the radical. So here, again, our invisible number in front of the radicals is 1. We really don't have to worry about that right now, so we're going to multiply what's inside. So I'm going to go square root of 30 times 2, which gets me the square root of 60. And then we need to simplify if at all possible. I know I can divide 60 by 4. It goes in there once, then we have 20, and we have 15. 15 I cannot divide by a perfect square because it's only 3 and 5. So the square root of 60 becomes the square root of 4 times the square root of 15. And then we know that 4 is a perfect square. Oh, and then we have the square root of 15. So when we multiply radicals, we always want to check the number inside to see if we can simplify it first, because if you can simplify the smaller numbers, a lot of the times it makes our life a lot easier. But 35, I cannot divide by a perfect square. 56, can I divide by 4? I get 1, I get 16, I get 14. So I can go ahead and break down 56. And so 50 square root of 56 equals 4 square root of 14. And then it becomes 2 square root of 14. So I can do 5 times 2 square root of 14. And we're going to bring down this one. And so 5 times 2 is going to be 10 square root of 14. And then 3 times the square root of 35. So it just makes our math a little bit easier, especially when it comes to simplifying, if we can simplify first. So I'm going to multiply my whole numbers. So 3 times 10 is 30. Then I'm going to do 35 times 14, which gets me 490. So we have 30 square root of 490. So now we need to break down the square root of 490. So as soon as I see the 490, I know I can divide it by 49, which I know is a perfect square, and I'm going to be left with 10. So we get the square root of 7, or square root of 49 is 7. 10, I cannot divide any further. And so now I'm going to rewrite my problem as 30 times 7 square root of 10. So I need to do the 30 times 7, which is 210 square root of 10. All right, 35, I can't divide by a perfect square. 14, I also can't divide by a perfect square. So we're going to do the square root of 35 times 14, which gives me the square root of 490. And hey, we just did this problem. So I know that square root of 490 becomes 7 square root of 10. All right, this one, we're going to distribute the negative, or the square root of 5 through the parentheses. And so we're going to multiply the 2, and I want you to pause the video and do this on your own. And our correct answer should be 4 square root of 5 plus the square root of 10. And because we cannot simplify 10, we cannot combine these two terms. All right, dividing radicals. So we've got 2 different ways that we can do this, and it just kind of depends on what way works. So if our top number and our bottom number are perfect squares, let's say this was 4, we can simply do the square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 2 is 2, and so our final answer would be 2. But if we run into a problem where they're not both perfect squares, what we can do is we can combine both of these into one big radical. So I can take 16 divided by 8, which I know is 2, and so our final answer is going to be the square root of 2. So I'm looking here, neither one of these are perfect squares, but I can turn them into a big square root, which is 18 over 6. And so I know 18 divided by 6 is 3, and so we're left with a square root of 3. All right, so 704. I know that 4 is a perfect square, so my question is going to be, is 700 a perfect square? And the answer is no. So that means I'm going to turn it into a big square root and do 700 over 4. 700 divided by 4 equals 175. And I bet you that 175 can be divided by 25. In fact, 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175. So it's going to be 7 times. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 25, the square root of 7. We're going to take the perfect square, and our answer is going to be 5 square root of 7. All right, I want you to do this one on your own. And your answer should have been 4 square root of 3. All right, so this is a big thing that we're going to need to know how to do moving forward by the end of the week. So we call this rationalizing the denominator. We cannot have a square root in our denominator. And so we have to multiply whatever our fraction is by the number 1. Because remember, as long as we multiply it by the same thing, then we can do this math and we can get that square root out of the bottom. However, we're not going to use the number 1. We're going to use the same thing on top and bottom. So what we're going to get rid of is we're going to get rid of the square root of 10. And so to multiply something by 1, we have to multiply it by the same thing on top and on bottom. So we know that the top is going to be 4 square root of 10. And then if I have the square root of 10 times 10, that's the same thing as the square root of 10 squared. So we've talked before that squares get rid of square roots. So I'm going to leave 4 square root of 10 on top. And then when we get rid of the square root, I'm just simply left with the number 10. And so now what we need to do is we need to simplify our whole numbers. So 4 over 10 can simplify into 2 over 5. And we just put our square root of 10 on top with the 2. So square root of 10 is not something that we can simplify, so that is simply our answer. So again, anytime we see that square root in the denominator, we're going to multiply it by 1, and we're going to choose our 1 is going to be the square root over itself. So we get 4 square root of 8 over the square root of 8 squared. So again, squares get rid of square roots. So we get 4 square root of 8 over 8. I know that I can simplify the square root of 8. So the square root of 8 becomes the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which becomes 2 square root of 2. So I'm going to rewrite my fraction over 8. So now we need to do this multiplication. We need to do 4 times 2, which gets us 8 over the square root of 2 over 8. And anytime we have the same thing on top and bottom, they cancel out, leaving us with the square root of 2. All right, so now we have 7 over the square root of 18. So I'm going to go square root of 18 times square root of 18, which gets us... And then it just leaves us with 18. But again, I know that I can simplify the square root of 18. I know I can divide it by 9, which leaves me with 2, which means I have 3 square root of 2. So I'm going to plug that back in where the square root of 18 was. So times 3 square root of 2 over 18. So 7 times 3 is going to get me 21 square root of 2 over 18. And I know I can divide both of these by 3. So 21 divided by 3 is going to be 7. 18 divided by 3 is 6. And then we have our square root on top. All right, I want you to pause the video and do this one on your own. Your simplified answer should be square root of 5 over 15.